Welcome to the Mind Gut Conversation, your go to podcast for exploring cutting edge ideas in optimal health and the fascinating science of mind gut microbiome interactions. I'm your host, Emmer Meyer. Here we bring together thought leaders, groundbreaking researchers, and innovative practitioners to share insights that can transform the way you understand your body, mind, and overall well being. Whether you're a health enthusiast, a curious learner, or a professional in the field, this podcast is your gateway to unlocking the secrets of the mind-gut connection. So settle in, open your mind, and join us as we journey into the science and stories shaping the future of health. Today, I have the great pleasure to talk to Dr. Patrick Flynn, who has created a highly successful holistic approach to healthcare. He's a chiropractor and the founder and CEO of The Wellness Way, a network of health restoration clinics across the US, which in his own words think and act differently to solve the health challenges others can't. Our philosophy is founded on the idea that the human body was not designed for illness, and when properly cared for, can restore its innate ability to heal. Dr. Flynn is a highly sought-after speaker and best-selling author with educational training from numerous learning institutions, including Palmer College of Chiropractor, University of Wisconsin at Green Bay, and Wisconsin Marinette. Pioneering a different approach to healthcare, he has trained chiropractors, MDs, nurse practitioners, nurses, surgeons, pharmacists, health restoration coaches, and others. His network is now comprised of over 60 clinics seeing people from around the world. Welcome to the show, Patrick. So, let me jump right into it. What is the Wellness Way and how is it different from other wellness programs?
Well, how I defined what I created, I call them health restoration clinics. And our catchphrase is to think and act differently to solve the health challenges others can't. I believe that most healthcare today has spurred out of what the results that most people have not gotten and stuff. And so therefore, I go back to history based on my education. And then I started to look at when I came out of school back in 1999, even though, once again, I'm 50 years old now, I decided I want to do this when I was 13 years old. And because I had some health issues that weren't resolved by our conventional dominant form of healthcare. And so then I started to look at all the things put together. And then I started to piecemeal my degrees and came upon some things. And that's why it allowed me to develop The Wellness Way, more of like a health restoration, because I realized that if you really sat down and talked to people, is that most people, if I said, who here wants to be healthy, everybody raised their hand. If I asked about their kids and their grandparents, everyone, they want to be healthy. But then I really noticed that because of our current healthcare system, even dominant the last 50 to 70 years, it was never really about health. It was more about, disease treatment and management. And so therefore I said, well, then we have to approach this totally differently. So therefore I took my background and said, okay, listen, let's just, and I love the word wellness. And I said, here's a way that we can do it. And therefore, and I think the perspective with my background allowed me to look at differently than conventional medicine or functional medicine. So therefore, I believe there's a major premise. And I've talked to and interviewed and discussed this with many scientists. But I believe that most pathology is just adaptive physiology. Okay. And by that being said, that means we have to recognize that the body is a self-healing, self-regulating organism that has an innate intelligence that knows what it's doing. So I don't look at pathology as something that you just badly got. I look at it as something more of, hey, if you put your body into a long-term adaptive stress state, there is an adaptive physiological response that has to happen. Otherwise, you would pass away right away. I live in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And so if we go, it's 30 below during January. If I walk outside in the cold weather with just my shorts on, my body is going to adapt and pull the blood to my core. That's not a dumb response. And this is where I've been criticized massively in the public. But when I talk to scientists like you, they say, well, you're kind of making sense this way. It seems a little weird the way you say it, but I don't disagree with you. And I come out and say, the body doesn't make mistakes. It doesn't. It's programmed to actually adapt to every stressor there is. But if you keep it in a long-term stress state, there's going to be pathology and diseases that do present itself. So I said, well, what if we could find all those stressors? What if we could really find all those stressors? And so I said, listen, looking at the encompassing aspect of stressors, I said, there's trauma, so physical trauma, there's toxic, and there's thoughts. So I call it the 3 T's. So I started to apply that to everybody's life. And then, Doc, I've watched the most crazy illnesses, reverse, because if you get out of adaptive physiology and go back in homeostasis, that's normal function. And you'd be surprised what the body can do when it's in a normal functional state.
Yeah, this is remarkable. I mean, the difference, I mean, I would say my philosophy is very similar to yours. I mean, I realized that, when I spoke at one of your meetings, which was a phenomenal experience.
Thank you.
And clearly it's very different from, our current disease care model, where we have gotten real experts in creating or trying to create remedies for problems where the body is basically failed to use its own adaptive strategies. And is this something? I mean, how did you pick chiropractic healing? How did you pick this? I mean, there's obviously various ways that you could approach this.
So I was diagnosed as a juvenile delinquent when I was in school in 3rd grade, and I had all the behavioral issues, and I didn't realize this, that I suffered from allergies that was causing a neuroendocrine response. That's why, Doc, your work is basically my life. I had an immune response creating a neurological consequence. And so therefore, what I did is I got involved in immunology. I got involved in nutrition in my undergraduate and postgraduate schools. And so I started to say, listen, but if I went in the direction of immunology, I personally looked at immunologists and going, well, understanding the immune system, I didn't like the way the medical field did it. And then I looked at, from the nutritional standpoint, I said, I think dietitians are owned by big food companies. And I remember in my undergraduate class, they're teaching me that high fructose corn syrup is good for you. And I was like going, and I'm like, my goodness. So I actually, when I was 13, I was going to a chiropractor and I seen some changes with my allergies. And so therefore, now did I see everything change? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Did I see some positive progress? Yes. So I started looking into the history of chiropractic and going, oh my goodness, what we currently understand about chiropractic is not its long-term 130-year history. And so I fell in love with it's the philosophy, it's thinking, and it talked about that the body has innate intelligence and it governs itself. And the whole concept of adjusting is totally misguided today about what its purpose really is. So then I went in that direction. But I already had my background love for immunology and nutrition. And so therefore I got to be able to apply these things with more of a, let's say, a natural healing art. Because one thing, if you are in the natural world, you have to understand that the body is self-governing. I tell people this, I don't care if you're the greatest scientist in the world. You cut your finger, there's not one scientist that knows exactly how those cells go back to normal. You say, that can only be done by our own body. So I told people, I try to people to recognize how amazing the human body is. And now and I tell people, so when I approach a physical exam, I don't approach a physical exam from a pathological response. I say, what is the body trying to tell me? I say, it's trying to give us clues to its adaptive physiology. So therefore, I like the way chiropractic approached it. And what I did is I said, okay, listen, here's my immunology, here's my nutrition, here's my chiropractic. And I said, okay, now let's apply this to people today. And then the clinical results followed. So I love the thinking. I love the philosophy that recognized how amazing the human body was. And if you look at any kind of natural healing art, it gives massive credit. We trust more into doctors than we do actually the amazing healability of the body. And I've been speaking like this for 30 years. So I'm happy that we're seeing more of this come out. And I know they have medical doctors on Joe Rogan and all stuff of this. Like, man, if you actually cut the body open and take out a pathology, your body still has to heal it. Yes, we have to get back to understanding that the body knows what it's doing. It's not a broken down machine. I get very upset having a background in immunology that they talk about an autoimmune disease is where the body makes a mistake. There's no, I right over here, I have 30 textbooks plus that in immunology. I've read every one of them, studied. There's not one area does it say that the body made a mistake. There has to be a trigger, a flag, a response, receptor, and the immune system responds. But see, if they can't explain it, or maybe they caused it, because there's a lot of medical procedures that cause an autoimmune process, then they say, well, your body made a mistake. And I'm here to say, doc, and this is where I'll stand on it, and I'll debate anybody on it. The body doesn't make mistakes. It's adapting to its environment. And if we look at the germ theory, you can put it a terrain theory. If people say, well, doc, well, one of my family members got polio. I said, well, was he around any other person? Well, yes. Well, why didn't they get polio? Well, their immune system was compromised. Ooh, so the terrain was off first. Mm-hmm. So therefore, that's why when people say to me about, and we're going to get into this, which I love, your books and everything that way, you can't put a bad food into your body and accepting that your body understands moderation, because it doesn't. It has to respond to what you do to the terrain and environment. So I said, what if we could put together clinicians of all kinds and say, let's move in this direction? And then medical doctors, chiropractors, other practitioners said, man, we're getting the clinical results that we didn't, and we do have different backgrounds. But if we can make the foundational thinking this way, now we can get to clinical results. And then I've been following your research for a long time, and that's why I had you at my seminar. But see, here's what happens. If you notice, you spoke at a seminar with a bunch of doctors of all kinds, but you're also there with the public, and the public is starving for this information. Mm-hmm. So I've just governed everything towards the public, and that's what allowed me to open clinics all over the world.
Yeah, it's just, it's sort. I mean, for me, it's been fascinating to be at your big conference and see the enthusiasm and engagement of the audience. I've rarely seen anything like this. Certainly not at medical meetings. So this is something that must be contributing to the effectiveness of your approach. I mean, there's a lot of positive energy. Yeah. And people embrace, whatever new concepts they hear. How has this been received by the medical world, by the traditional medical world?
So here's what happens. I consider it like politics. 50% of people you talk to absolutely love you. 50% of people that call me a quack and not a real doctor and things like that. Whenever I speak to a scientist, whenever I speak to somebody that doesn't look at me as a competitor, we get along great. I've gotten to speak at medical schools. I've been to speak at medical conferences, a pharmacy conference, different things. And it's allowed me to share these ideas. And how I set the foundation is I love analogies, because I think that if we could speak in analogies, because I always geared towards the public. So whenever I speak at any medical conference, I'll sit there and say, hey, listen, and I believe this is the foundational idea that allows us to work synergistically, because people will think the way I speak that I'm anti-medicine. No. Let me give you an example. I always tell people, let's say we got done with this interview and you went home and your house is on fire. Well, we know from the education and the need of the house, we need to call the fire department. But the fire department only has two tools to deal with: an axe and a hose. They get there, they're knock your windows down, they're knock your door down, and the guy with the hose going inside and spray the inside house. Now, during the time that you call them to do it, they've destroyed a bunch of your house already just by trying to put out the fire. But the idea is this, and thank God we have that system. They get there on time, do their job, save the house. But the house is very toxic. You can't live in there. It needs to be rebuilt. So you're going to call a carpenter. And if the fire department is in there when they put the fire, no chance in our fire, the fire department must walk around dock going, hey man, I'm good at what I do. But let's say the carpenter walked in at the exact same time, at the exact same house. He'd be like, oh my goodness, this is a mess. I need to come in and restore this thing back to normal. Well, that's why I view healthcare. Medicine is like the fire department. And thank God we do have that. We know this. We know worldwide, US ranks one of the top in emergency care system. But we are some of the worst when it comes to restoring, that's why I call it health restoration, and rebuilding houses, because they're telling dietitians that highly processed food's okay, soy is okay, high fructose corn syrop's okay, vegan's okay. You know what I'm saying? All these things, I'm sitting there going, no, we need to rebuild the body. And so I tell people, I take a carpenter approach. So when I go speak at a medical conference, they're like, well, doc, I need a carpenter approach. And I was speaking at this conference in Iowa. I had a pediatrician run up to me right after stage. He's like, teach me how to be a carpenter type doctor. I said, I can. And so I embrace the fire department medical system that has done a wonderful job of emergency care, fire department saving lives. I thank God that we have Novocaine. I would never want to go to a dentist without it. Do you know what I'm saying? I thank God that we have anesthesia. I thank God for all these wonderful medical procedures. But if the fire department looked at you, Doc, and said, hey, I'm going to help you rebuild your house with an axe and hose, you would look at him like he's ridiculous. Well, I'm sorry. We cannot restore a body back to normal with a drug or surgery. I'm sorry. If there is something out there, please let me know. But if you understand any aspect of science, I have a very good friend who makes drugs for a living. He's actually considered one of the most top experts in nitric oxide. And he even says, Doc, I create drugs that inhibit and manipulate and do things with the body. And I said, yes, but we cannot manipulate our body back to health. Health is about normal function, not inhibition or manipulation. So therefore, the medical field has, when I create those examples, I'll say, listen, you be you, let me be. I'm not trying to do your job. I can't. I don't want to do it. I'm a restoration kind of doctor. And you're a fire department emergency type doctor. And I think that both are needed. We are just so dominant in the medical fire department view that if I come along and share a different idea, they don't attack the message. They try to attack the messenger. You're just a chiropractor. You're a quack. You're just, I'm like, okay, but then why am I getting so many great clinical results where you have failed dramatically?
Yeah. So, coming to the effectiveness of your approach, I mean, obviously having 60, very successful clinics, having an international reputation. I mean, there must be something. I mean, you didn't get this reputation by having published in Nature and Science. You've gotten it because apparently the patients that come to your clinics are happy and they get positive results.
Yep.
What kind of problems do they come to you with? Is this a wide range, or is this sort of a?
So it varies dramatically, but let me give you where I spent most of my career, and then we can start from there. When I was interning, I met this beautiful woman, and she said that she couldn't get pregnant, and she had endometriosis, ulcerative colitis, cystic acne, and cluster headaches. And well, here's what happened. And when I start to ask them carpenter questions, now we got the example of them, because how I even approach a history and examine everything is different. So therefore, I asked her specific things and realized that the care that she received on the medical field was extremely incomplete. And so therefore, I started to work with her. And now that woman and I have 4 beautiful daughters. Okay. And we went from, and I have pre and post ultrasounds, all of her diagnostics that show her endometriosis resolving. And I get so frustrated when I just share the clinical results and they say, that's impossible. I'm like, well, no, not only have I done that there, but I've done that thousands of times with our patients, and our doctors have done it thousands of times with our patients. So I love how they argued seeing it all change in all the diagnostics. And they're like, and I literally had an OB one time tell one of my patients it was spontaneous remission. She goes, then why did I suffer for 15 years and then all of a sudden spontaneously choose after I started seeing Dr. Flynn? Okay. So and then I realized that how women understand their female body and how even the public is taught about hormonal health care is all from the fire department viewpoint. And I'm telling you right now, it's very misleading. Nobody say, Doc, how can you be that critical? Well, we have more breast cancer. We have more female hormone problems. 10% of the world of female population suffers from PCOS. If they're so right, why do we keep on chronically getting more sick and sick? And then I realized that when I asked my wife, which if you know anything about endometriosis, I asked her very simply, I said, okay, listen, I said, can I see your labs? Well, as a 23-year-old woman that she was at this time, all they did was measure estradiol. And I said, well, where are her other hormones and the rest of her metabolites? And the doctor said that's insignificant. I'm like, how can I judge a estrogen dominant type condition with taking one estrogen instead of all of them? And I called up LabCorp. I called their labs and said, can we measure them? They said, yes. And so then it gave me perspective, because if we look at how a lot of things are done, if I want to build a house, I want to make sure I have the full blueprint. So how can I build hormones back to normal if I have one of them and assuming that the rest of them are going to go back to normal? So I started to test everybody differently. So my whole career has been based on female hormones. But I will tell you this, Doc, and you know this so well. If you have a GI problem, it can throw off your hormones. And see, I love analogies. I say the body's like a Swiss watch because, I love analogies. Fire to recover, Swiss watch. That your body's a bunch of gears that all interact. And medicine specializes in gears. And a carpenter type doctor says, listen, I have to have the understanding of the GI, the brain, the nervous system, the muscular system, all these systems, because here's what happens. People, one of the number one reasons why people still go to doctors say over 40 is high blood pressure. Well, if we look this way, if I smash your big toe, your blood pressure goes up. So if I put a pebble in your shoe all day and walk around and your blood pressure jumps up and I go to the current doctor, he'll say, do you know how bad blood pressure is? You could die from this. Here, we're going to put you on this the rest of your life. That's like trying to rebuild a house, water it down every day. It's going to rot, and we call those side effects. But the idea is this. I'm the kind of doc says, well, let's find out what's the stressor. Is it a trauma, toxin, or thought? Well, that looks at trauma. We're going to move that. We're going to move it, and blood pressure starts to go back to normal. So we come from the standpoint of we deal with all things due to the fact that the body's like a Swiss watch, and Durang, a pebble in your shoe, a bad diet. But I will tell you this, and Doc, you can correct me. I respect you. I brag about you. I tell people, get your books, Patient's Mind, everything like that, and all the offices. I have been convinced, and it's only by clinical experience, when it comes to females, mental stress destroys them faster than anything. I see horrible things with hormones, GI, every system of their body. Do you follow me? And I even see, for example, I'm a little nervous when women are, under high stress and even eating a good diet, because hypochlorhydria is so common under fight or flight that they don't even get proper digestion. And now the small and large intestine are going to be, and the immune system is going to be now dependent on digestion instead of just our digestive processes that way. So I just look at the fact of going, we end up dealing with all conditions because our current medical system has dramatically failed people. And I'm not saying they haven't done wonderful successes, but you understand that disease management never gets anybody back to normal. It just leaves them addicted to things to get through the day.
I mean, what I love about your conceptual framework is really systems biology. It's applied systems biology.
Yes.
And I think science is gradually moving in that direction. Obviously, medicine is very slow because I would say the educational program, it takes about 10 years from something that happens in the lab to being translated into a textbook. And on top of this, it's the traditional medical system is very lucrative.
Well, Doc, because of you, I came up with a famous saying. So let me interrupt you in here for just a second. Apologize. Because of you, I came up with a famous saying I didn't realize it could be quoted in papers. Medical research and medical practice don't match up well.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that look at your research. Why isn't that implemented into current form of healthcare? Because it would dramatically change everything. And I have an opinion and a theory. I don't know if I'm right. I just think there's a lot less money in your stuff than it is in what they currently do.
Absolutely.
But so I just believe that medical research and medical practice. And so my thing is this. I think that we have more chance of taking your research and your clinical expertise, applying to clinics like ours than ever will in the medical system. I might be wrong, but that's why we follow your research so much. That's why it's applied to these clinics, and we're getting great results, Doc.
Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously, part of your success, just listening to you gives a good example. But even at this conference, when I saw you presenting, and you've become like a healer, a nationally recognized healer. And clearly there's always this, what we call with a negative bitone, the placebo effect, which I think is actually a very good thing that our brains can generate the placebo response. How much do you think that your success is dependent on like the story that you tell and just the general model that you provide to patients? So if somebody comes into your office, I'm sure they've seen multiple physicians. They generally have not gotten any benefit from any of the procedures or any of the diagnostics, and then they come to you and you tell them sort of a holistic concept of what's wrong with them, and what needs to be altered in order to become well again. How much do you think that placebo response plays a role in your success?
This may surprise you, but I'd say well over half, if not more. Now, let me give you the example why. So I'm just gonna change your language a little bit because Doc, like I know you well, you know me a little bit, but I want to think. I am so fascinated and intrigued by the innate ability we have to function and heal. You know what I'm saying? So I never want to take credit for, in my estimation, what God created this amazing healing ability, because you cut your finger, I can't do nothing about it. You know what I'm saying? Now, can I support the processes? Can I remove the things that could interfere? Absolutely. But we have to go back and recognize how amazing the human body is. So then a person comes in and I kind of go through this, like you talk, a systems approach, a biological approach that says, hey, listen, and look at over your shoulder, the mind-gut connection. Do you understand that we know one fraction of what the mind, one fraction what this body really can accomplish. But sitting back and watching these intricate parts and being so obsessed with female hormones, man, you ever want to see the body at just an amazing work? Watch the cycle every month. Do you understand that millions of cells have to change constantly through the month just for a woman to biologically produce a child or have, a normal cycle? And to me, that's so fascinating. So therefore, when a person comes in, they've been on this current approach that in a way, and I don't even know how to say this nicely, that's kind of antibody, that's kind of anti-function, that's kind of manipulation in disease management process. And I'm sitting there going, blood pressure, your body's genetically programmed for normal. This concept that we are genetically programmed for disease, I'm sorry. And people say, well, it triggered a gene. Yes, but guess what happens? It can change. And here, people say, now we can see some genetic abnormalities like in trisomy 21, things this, but you know just as well as your work, a gene can be turned on or turned off. So therefore, maybe those trauma toxin thoughts, maybe those bad habits, that's why I'm more fascinated with the history of people's lifestyles than their genetic history, because if I love this. Oh, doc, I'm 35 years old, went to the doctor, he said high blood pressure. And since my grandpa had it, my dad had it, it's genetic. I'm like, well, if it's genetic, why didn't you have it at 2 days old when you were born? Because as your blueprint can change, it can. We've seen it happen. Genes turn on and off. Now, science doesn't know exactly everything it does. We know there's an epigenetic variant that way. But I tell people this, if we can get you back into homeostasis, I bet you have a better chance of turning your genes off that are bad than actually turn them on. Do you understand? And so therefore, I believe that there's a psychosomatic to every area of the body. You understand? I just believe that that without hope, it's a bad. And they've even studied this in cancer research. The people who were the most compliant to the doctors actually died earlier. The people who said, I'm going to fight, I'm this, they actually lived longer and sometimes recovered better because there's a psychological aspect. And neurologically, if we look at the nervous system itself, it's a great coordinator. And a lot of people don't know this about the nervous system because we talk so efferently. The vast majority of the nervous system is afferent. It's trying to understand its environment. Do you understand? And that's why when food's put into the body, they talk about the gut being the second brain. Well, that's because there's so many afferent stimulation that comes and there's a constant talk. And I'm sorry, doc, that's just fascinating. And if we can get doctors and practitioners to really be fascinated by the human body, we can go, instead of manipulating, inhibiting, stimulate, how can we support it? Because it's genius. It's genius. And nutritionists and dietitians, where I sat in class in undergraduate, saying everything is okay in moderation. I'm like, your body doesn't understand moderation. It either has to adapt to something that can take and build and restore your body back to normal, or it puts your body into fight or flight, where there now is an immune response, which is all inflammatory. And so therefore, you're going to have an immune response to it that way. And now that immune system is systemic. And that's why you can eat something bad in the morning or at night and your joints. And I'll tell you this, even in my world, I believe that the vast majority of joint pain isn't coming directly from the joint. And I'm a chiropractor because you could here, we've all done this. Oh, well, I don't drink alcohol, but if you drink a little too much alcohol at night, you wake up, your joints are all sore the next day. Well, yeah, because the immune system is systemic and therefore you're inflammatory all over. And ladies, I'll prove to you beyond a shadow of a doubt that the vast majority of your pain is actually psychological. And so therefore, I truly believe it. And to wrap it up, I can honestly say I believe that 75% of even walking into a doctor that gives hope starts the biochemical, the neurological response that moves you into a healing state.
Yeah, I mean, I find it fascinating. We've come from very different angles to similar patient problems, and I personally would say listening to you and having spent a day there at the meeting really indicated to me that we're on very similar wavelengths. And the concepts. Would you say that? So I've come to many of my insights from a lifelong career of studying things in the most minute ways. But your main lessons have really come from listening to patients, I imagine. I mean, you've not gone like what you're teaching and what you're practicing is not something that you learn in school. In any of the training, or is that not correct? Would you say there are educational processes that you have gone through
There
other
is.
than listening to patients that helped you to formulate this philosophy and this approach?
Both. Now let me explain. I believe that that if you can go back to this, and you said it before, if you can understand normal function of the GI, normal function of the endocrine system, normal function of the neurological system, there are labs out there because I'm a really big diagnostic person. I love labs. I'm obsessed with it. My whole start when I first started my career is we don't guess, we test. So ladies, I was very frustrated when you would come in with one estrogen tested when I want to test 10 of them. Okay. I get very frustrated in immunology when they say you have a compromised immune system. I'm like, okay, let me see your T cells. Let me see well, I don't have any labs. So how can we make judgments on people without great diagnostics? So what I did, because no joke, I didn't see anybody doing it. Even when I was in chiropractic school, I said, what if I can run these labs that exist in any doctor? I keep on telling people, labs are labs. Like, for example, we know that 90% of all autoimmune or all of Hashimoto's, all of thyroid problems are autoimmune. Well, then why don't we measure the immune system to help reverse that endocrine problem? See, and that's the Swiss watch, immune system affecting the endocrine system. Well, no, they're just going to put them on levothyroxine, synthroid, and the integrative approach, more the functional medicine approach, is let's just put them on a pig gland, like maybe NP or Armor, which I'm okay with. It's better than the negative side effects of levothyroxine and synthroid. But the idea is this, that's still, once again, an outside-in approach. So there's many labs. I just had to come from a standpoint of how do I put this into a clinical practice like a carpenter type doctor? And then, no joke, I get asked to speak at a lot of medical things because a lot of doctors today, and Doc, you probably seen this too talking to them, a lot of doctors are very frustrated with the system because the system controls them. I say, hey, Doc, why don't you run TSH, T4, T3, free T3, and then the antibodies? And they said, if I don't have justification for the insurance company, they're going to come down hard on me. Mm-hmm. And I'm like going, but you're the doctor. Your job is to get this person back to normal. So I believe our current healthcare system can't do it. And that's why I live in a cash world. You know what I'm saying? And so therefore there's another critique. You're just a chiropractor. You're just a quack. Insurance doesn't pay for it. I'm like, IVF works well, but it's $26,000 cash. Just because insurance doesn't pay for it doesn't mean it's not valid and stuff. So I believe that we're in a great shift. I believe that and I always tell people, as long as there's people that are going to change their thinking, we're going to be able to actually have those people come in and give them a great system in order to follow. And one thing also too about our care is there's patient compliance. And I don't mean taking things. And this is the thing that, you're an expert at, getting people to change their lifestyle is extremely difficult. You say, I'm with my background in nutrition, I love fiber. I love fiber and I love protein. Okay. And so therefore, I'm begging people to eat sauerkraut all day long. I'm literally begging them. You know what I'm saying? I'm begging them to go for the high fiber foods. I'm begging them to get decent proteins, both animal and plant sources and things like that. And obviously today with people's high paced lifestyle, they sometimes have a hard time of complying. So they see results, but they see them slower than if they would jump all in.
Mm-hmm. So of the components that you use, so I mean, from the diagnostic standpoint, you emphasize that testing for you is really essential on a much broader base. But what about the interventions? Which three components would you say in your approach to patients are the most important?
Number one, sleep. Number two, nutrition. Number three, adding some nutritional things in, especially herbs. Those would probably be the three biggest things I will say are the most important. I am a big component. Like October, we have a sleep challenge. I am women, and I have a video that has over 1 billion views saying this, and even made to some comedians' pages. Women need more sleep than men do. And I can scientifically prove that. If you look at the circadian rhythms, look at the hormone reserves, look at how it has to do to restore them. Women need more sleep, okay? And men need sleep too. It's extremely important. Women just need more, okay? And if you can't sleep, you can't heal. You just and just what it even does neurologically to a person. You got to remember, if you go 3 days without sleep, psychosis can settle in. Do you understand? That's how important. So we need to get people back to that. Now what happens is this, and I would say when it comes to sleep, I also want stress management, because I'm very concerned about women in stress. I'm very concerned. I see too many responses. I see too many hormonal changes. I see too many digestive changes with high levels of stress. Now, men are affected too that way digestively, but I see such a big hormonal component because I've always been obsessed with hormones. I see immune components. But then also here's what happens. We need the lumber, the plaster, the hammer, nails. So therefore, you need to put certain things in your body. And there's certain ingredients that we can get from medicinal herbs. There's certain things we can get from, certain components in foods that we need to, we know this. We know if we want to, here, and this, you're going to love this, Doc, okay? I'm a big fan of butyrate. I love testing. I think if a person has low butyrate, I don't care what you do, your GI is in trouble, okay? Mm-hmm. And so I see it on a stool test. And so therefore, I love chicory root, okay? Things that are going to now give the cells its energy capacity and things like that. So therefore, please tell me, maybe I don't know what it is, but please tell me some pharmaceutical or surgical intervention that's going to help the cells restore the butyrate concentration back. I just don't know of any. And maybe there is, but chicory root, guess what happens? And there's other nice things that change our butyrate that way. So therefore, I want to not only stop stressing out the house, my analogy, fire department, carpenter, house, but then give the components for it to rebuild. And that's why I think sleep, stress management, nutritional, and then herbal things that have specific components that you can specifically target specific tissues to help it rebuild. I'm going to blow your mind away. Watch this. There's a medicinal herb called gymnema. Okay, I'll spell it for you. Gymnema. Do you understand that the constituents, the bioactive components in there, gymnemic acid, help you regenerate the beta cells of the pancreas? All the research is there. But see, medical research and medical practice never match up. So why do we have all these regenerative, restoring, put our body back to normal herbs or other nutritional things? And this is not on every podcast, everything like crazy, because they don't know how to put it in practice. And that's what I try to do significantly. So I think those are the top three things that I think are so important to actually help restore that body back to normal.
Do you get feedback about the success of your treatments from your 60 clinics, or do you just base it on your own experience?
Oh, no. In 60 clinics, a bunch of coaching docs, thousands of other docs that I train and stuff like that. And believe it or not, I will tell you this. I get a lot of doctors in the medical field call me up and say, okay, how'd you do this? I'm like, Doc, you can do this. You have a background in the GI, you have a background in endocrinology. Here, research these things. And that's how I got to speak at some non-chiropractic conferences, or how I got to speak at functional medicine conferences and things like that. I'm just saying, hey, listen. And see, I've always said, I love teaching programs. I really do. We need scientists like you behind closed doors doing wonderful things, but we need to put it into a clinical model that now patients can go to and get advice from. And because of the way our current healthcare system has dominated across the world, we saw it during COVID, it's not controlled by the doctor, you saying? And so therefore, I started out, doc, not a joke. I started my first office on $500 at a dead-end warehouse, abandoned street, because I had no money. I had nothing. I just had some good ideas that I knew could get some. And so if you think of it this way, I try to teach this to doctors. If you want good income, get good outcomes. That's how, and so I guess the wellness way is birthed by a failure, a demand for the public and stuff like that. And then when I start sharing these things with other doctors of all professions, from medical to natural, everything, like I spoke to, 400 doctors on Saturday and stuff. But I've always had a heart for the public. That's why when I did my leadership longevity conference, if you think of it this way, leadership, there is a psychological aspect of leadership and mental strength and clarity and things like that. That's health related. Longevity, guess what happens? So I'm trying to give people these principles so they live a long, healthy, positive, great life, because you don't want to be thinking negatively every day, because it will change the biochemistry and put your body in fight or flight. And that's why I'm so, I'll say it again, because this has always been my passion for 25 years due to my wife's health. Of my wife, we reversed all of her conditions. She's doing amazing. She's vibrant. She's great. I'm 50 years old. I go 100 miles an hour every single day, and I believe that that's the life that most people want to live.
Exactly. So a couple of things. One is the way you practice healing or healthcare seems to me quite different from the typical chiropractic model. Yeah. I mean, so typically people, when they think they go to a chiropractor, because some joint is out of alignment, or their neck hurts, or but you've taken this much, much wider. I mean, this is no longer just your musculoskeletal system. This is way beyond that. I mean, would you agree? So typically, I mean, how many chiropractors would practice with the model that you are practicing, as opposed to, what's classically understood that a chiropractor does?
This is going to surprise you. Everything I taught you has been down in chiropractic history for over 100 years. See, if you look at chiropractic, was always the opposite of medicine. We won in a Supreme Court case because we always spoke like this, and AMA tried to destroy chiropractic. See, so people do not realize some of the most foundational things that I practice came from our history. It's just that here's what happened. And this has happened in the medical field too. In our world, we call it the Mercedes 80s. They went to the chiropractic schools and went to the corporate organization and said, if you accept this part of your care, which is joint and pain, we will get you on an insurance program, Blue Cross Blue Shield. And therefore, you went from $7 to $10 a visit to $40. And that's why it was called the Mercedes 80s. So my profession sold out just like everybody else did. And see, so the foundational things, and that's why I get to speak. And I say, listen, if we actually went back to chiropractic when it was written down in 1895 and beyond, 90% of the stuff I just taught you was a philosophical premise that we all did. So it's going to sound really funny. I'm actually practicing the way chiropractors are supposed to practice. It's just that it's more accepted. It's more accepted in the world. But I'm like, I'm sorry. When I have women come in that have spent $70,000 on IVF, and there's more healthcare problems, that I don't want to be accepted. I don't care about being liked. I think that being diagnosed as a juvenile delinquent and told I was never becoming anything, stuff like that, I think God prepared me for the way of going, who cares what people say? So my goal, Doc, is to actually understand and bring chiropractic and its foundational things so people recognize, because guess what happens? Our education is great. Now, did our schools change and things like that? Yeah, I had one of the school presidents mad at me because I said, you guys sold out and you're more concerned about your rugby team than you are about getting out what we really should be doing to patients.
Mhm.
So I tell people, Doc, I am an equal opportunity offender. I offend everybody. You know what I'm saying? And if I don't offend you, talk to me, I'll figure something out, okay? Because I think we need to create some offense. Do you understand statistics? 6 out of 10 people have some chronic illness. 4 out of 10 have 2 or more. I'm offended. I'm offended that these simple, basic principles of how the body works, if they're applied, could change. And you've ever looked the most suffering times of people's lives is the fact that we may live a little bit longer, even though the last 4 years has changed. People aren't living anymore. They're sick all the time. They're doing these things. And I'm sorry. I think, and I believe that, and that's why I love being a chiropractor. And so people can say what they want based on my education, but my education has led me to get where I am today.
Yeah, no, this is so one other comment. So you mentioned several times women's issue in our conversation. So I'm interested in women's issues. So we've had a research center at UCLA funded by the NIH and Office of Research for Women's Health. It's called a SCORE grant for more than 15 years now. And so we're very interested in sex-related differences in, brain-gut microbiome interactions. And so you mentioned something that, women are more exposed or react more to stress. I would say from when I look at it objectively, women do have more stress. They have to multitask. It's kind of remarkable when I look at my young scientific colleagues that they would get their PhD and raise children and, in some ways take care of their husbands. And it's amazing that they do like 3 times as many challenging tasks. Do you think they actually it's the greater exposure to stress, or do you think there's actually something different the way the female body responds to stress?
I'll give you my opinion. I think it's the latter. I think it's the way the female body responds. For example, let's say, Doc, you're at my conference and all of a sudden I don't like you and I go to attack you on stage. Your testosterone goes up. Okay. If we look at the biochemical conversions, the production and conversions that happen in female hormones, when a female goes into fight or flight, so let's say she even has a decent day, okay, but then has a mental bad something, she gets a phone call. Her body moves into fight or flight. Now, instead of being in an anabolic state, we know that her estrogens develop all her sex characteristics, progesterone maintains it. Progesterone now is obviously at a significant level compared to men because we all have the same hormones, just at different levels. But now progesterone, it's even called a pregnenolone steal. Progesterone can be depleted because it converts into our cortisol and our cortisone. Now, if you think about it this way, if you have any GI issue and there's an inflammatory response, your body produces its own corticosteroids. And what happens is this, and it will steal it from a woman's anabolic hormones, progesterone mainly, and now it leaves it deficient. It's why women are so deficient in progesterone. So therefore, as they take on more of these tasks, biologically, they have more chance of actually reducing progesterone. And we know this statistically. Number one reason why miscarriage exists, low progesterone. We understand that endometriosis, sometimes you can have normal estrogens, but low progesterone. So there's not a balance there. So estrogen becomes dominant in the body, breast cancer and endometriosis and all these conditions. If a guy, do you understand that that's one thing I laugh about when we look at some of the political things today? When a guy is put under a fight or flight, anabolically, he raises. Now, digestively, he's very similar to a woman. See, I think, now this is, and I would love to hear your opinion on this, Doc. I've been waiting to ask you this for a long period of time. Do you know the number one thing that scares me in digestive problems is hypochlorhydria? I think it's overlooked. If the stomach acid is not proper, small, large intestine, gallbladder release, pancreatic release, and everything, to me, it's a domino effect. Do you see what I'm saying? And when women are under mental stress, hypochlorhydria happens. If men are under stress, hypochlorhydria happens. I think there's a similarity in GI. And I looked at some of the research. I'm concerned with people having a protein shake and going out and working out right away because you lack stomach acid, and now you're throwing that undigested protein in your stomach, and now you wonder why H. pylori and everything starts to overgrow and everything. Whole nother topic. That's your expertise. I do have some theories. Okay, so therefore, I do believe that women actually are more susceptible to stress because. And that's why, if you ever look at it this way, those women that had the PhDs, you know what's really funny, Doc? The first question I would ask these women is, Miss Dr. PhD, doing all stuff like this. You ever skipped or delayed your cycle? Oh, Doc, my goodness, I had a bad exam and I skipped my period for 2 weeks. And I'm like, you know what I'm saying? So therefore, and what if I could prove to you, and this is really true, testosterone, its mechanism of action is very aggressive, very laser focused, so we can forget about everything that goes around. Doc, I guarantee that you leave your beautiful wife or kids and you go to work and you forget they even exist. Estrogen receptors exist all over the body, including the brain. So therefore, anytime as their estrogens go up or change stuff like that, it's connected to everything. So by nature, women are going to have these responses. So to tell me that a man and a woman are the same and how we can deal with the world, I'm sorry, I don't see it the same way.
Yeah, thanks for this answer. I mean, it's really I just came back from our annual meeting at the NIH, where all these research centers that all look at sex differences presented, and that's clearly some accomplishment by this Office of Research of Women's Health, that they have introduced that people have to look at the differences between men and women in many functions. And so in the brain is definitely several centers deal with the brain responses to stress and stress responsiveness. So we've almost come to the end. Let me ask you one question. We haven't even talked about this. You've written 2 books, and I have to admit I've not read them. But I will, because I find it intriguing how they start. So both start with the word "I disagree." So what is it that you disagree with in a nutshell?
It started with when I was diagnosed in 3rd grade of being a juvenile delinquent. I had a gut brain issue. It started with college, when my professors tell me the high fructose corn syrup was good for you. It started in chiropractic school, where they told me things, and I just put my hand up and said, I disagree. And then, but see, here's what happens. But then the concept of disagreeing now led me to take action to figure out what was agreeable, what was good, and what could be proven. And so therefore, so when I wrote the book, it became an international bestseller. And then 5 years later, I had more things to put in there just for the public. And in the book, the second book was dramatically different, even though it has some similarities. I try to keep my analogies all in there so you get the concepts. But I said, I still disagree. And here's what happens. And the rate of chronic illness over the last 30 years continues to get worse. So if we don't have doctors and professors, and I'm hoping this happened, Doc, I want medical research and medical practice to match up. Because I read medical research daily. I subscribe to a lot of journals, and I'm always and because I'm so obsessed with biochemistry, physiology, immunology, it's very easy for me to go through it and go, this is adaptive physiology. You're looking at this pathology. If you just looked at it this way, I disagree with you. Look at this. You could have a whole perspective. So when I go speak at this, I just try to get them to come from a different perspective. It's like when they have a picture, like 2 walls, and they have this tube. Or you have a 6 and a 9, one way it looks like a 6, one a 9, they're sitting there arguing. I'm like, come from a different perspective, and therefore you'll be able to look at it totally different. So I just disagreed with the way the world looks at healthcare. I disagree with the way that these things are coming up. And in my estimation, even how we look at male and female, it's not going the right direction. It's only getting worse. And so I spoke at this medical conference, and I put up one slide. And you know this pathway quite well. If we go to the P450 cytochrome pathways, and this is the CYP3A4, okay, 3 or 4, it's responsible for eliminating most of the medications, okay? They estimate from 50 to 70%. It helps us convert estrogens from different forms. It's not developed properly till it's pretty much non-existent through up to about 1 year old. So I said to some pharmacists I was speaking to at a conference, I said, how can we justify giving certain medications when the basic pathways of elimination don't exist yet? And they're like, good question. So why can't we come to that perspective? Okay. Second of all, that pathway is more dominant in women than it is in men. So therefore, if we start injecting men with estrogens, which is a major component, the male body is not meant to take that levels of estrogen, no matter what they psychologically think they are. I just said, doctors, first, do no harm. How can you say this is okay? I'm sorry. I disagree. And here's the science behind it. Now you give me what you think. And instead of attacking the message, they attack the messenger. You're just a chiropractor. Well, that gives you a different perspective. Oh, nutrition, different perspective. Even out, different perspective. And so therefore, I just am disagreeing because I'm seeing the consequence in people's healthcare and the suffering and sickness that, I'm sorry, I believe 10 years from now, I'm going to write, I'm still disagreeing. You know what I'm saying? So, little soapbox.
Well, thanks, Patrick, for this fascinating conversation. I have to say, really enlightening, and yeah, I'm so glad we connected last year, and I hope we'll continue these interactions in the future. I would recommend to anybody to look you up on the internet under the Wellness Way. I mean, it's a very informative. You know, it's a very informative source for, I think, a lot of people who are interested in this in this issue and have. So thanks again. I would also recommend people to read your books. Looking forward to the continuation of our conversation.
Yes, and Doc, thank you for your continued work. We apply your medical research, at least in our practices, and then the clinical outcomes come. So once again, thank you for all the work. Continue to do that, and I hope you live I know we'll stay in contact, but I hope you live a long, happy life, because then therefore you can continue to do the wonderful research because you have the passion and the effort and the understanding that the public needs here. And that's why it was very easy for me to get you to come to our conference, and the crowd loved you. Your information was great. And to see how the crowd basically almost wanted to give you a standing ovation when you said that you need to eat meat. So that was great. They loved everything you said. So thank you, and God bless you.
Okay. Thanks again, Patrick.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.